Hey, good morning, Keith.
Good morning, Brandon. How are you today?
I'm doing great. The lighting in your office is amazing.
It is the first day of spring, and it's a beautiful sunny day, but it is cold. There is a cold wind. I just had a run, finished a run a few minutes ago, and it was nippy. Doesn't feel like spring yet.
And I like how you threw in the little run reference. Well done.
Well, that's how I know it's nippy. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. Otherwise, I would just be sitting here with a cup of coffee.
So last time we discussed quitting culture and alluded to at that time that maybe down the road rather quickly we should probably talk about this cancel culture stuff. And so today we're going to talk about cancel culture. And we are not the only ones. Uh, just recently, Wes McAdams on his podcast, the Bible Study Podcast, discussed it. So for folks that are listening to this, if you haven't yet checked in with Wes, on his podcast, please do. I'll try to include a link when we post this video. But at least three other podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis are talking about this idea of cancel culture. So it's not just a little thing off in the corner, it's a rather big thing. I find that people that typically are not political or interested in more things beyond the central point of their life, like their family, are now talking about it, trying to understand it, trying to figure out, why Aunt Jemima can't be on a bottle of syrup, and what's up with
Yeah.
Mr. Potato Head or something, like right, like they just it's catching their eye, and a lot of people are talking about it, and so seems well within bounds for us to have a chat on it. So with that as a basic intro, what say you?
Yeah, and some of this, and I think some of the reason that so many people are talking about it is it has become so radical, so extremism, and so I think that catches people's attention. I also think that once you begin this process of canceling, where do you actually stop? Where does it end? And I think that's what's led to this extremism that we have. But it's all very inconsistent, right? I mean, it's all so inconsistent. So you get a driver's license, you buy an airplane ticket, whatever, you have to select a gender, and there's only two. Maybe in California there's 47. I don't know, but still, I even checked, even as inclusive as my preferred airline likes to view themselves. When you go to buy a ticket, you select one of two genders, and that's it. Everybody lives by that rule, but then we're going to talk about we can't have Mr. Potato Head, and all that kind of stuff. So it's all very, very inconsistent, and everybody's big on these pronouns, and there appears to be no place to stop. That once you begin this process, there's nowhere you stop.
Yeah, and that's an awesome question to bring up with regards to this topic, because anything healthy, I don't care if it's a home project, a relationship project, there's this end goal that you're hoping to achieve. And with this, it sort of awkwardly missing that. Like, I mean, honestly, right? I mean, when we're talking about Confederate statues, there's more of a consensus that, maybe Robert E. Lee isn't somebody that we should have a statue of, maybe. But Pepe Le Pew, I don't, and all that in between, and we haven't even yet brought up the reality of the folks that are public that are being canceled, and so yeah, what's the end goal is a very healthy question for whoever is practicing some form of cancel culture. So why do you think this is a thing?
Well, I don't know. I think there's probably several reasons. One of them is ignorance. And that's, I think, pretty immediate. Like, so you mentioned, I'm thinking back to last summer when the racial tensions were so high and people were going into parks and taking down statues that had been there for 120 years. And then, because there were Civil War people. And then the next thing you know, there's a group in San Francisco taking down a statue of Abraham Lincoln for the same reason. What? This is the guy that ended this like, and there's just tons of ignorance, so obviously there's some of that. I think there's probably, um, for some, there's this, like fear of missing out. Like there's FOMO, like everybody else is getting something canceled. Everybody else is getting their whatever, I want to get mine. But I think ultimately the root of the problem is people, don't want to hear the dissenting view. And somebody might hear that and say, that's right, I've noticed that. But everybody sometimes just kind of naturally repels the dissenting view. I have my view, I have my belief, I have my narrative. I know why I believe, why I think, what I feel. And I don't really want to hear. If yours is different, I mean, we do really well with people that are similar to us. And that's one of the things I've said is that, it's not race. So going back to all the racial tensions, it's not race at all, because if my neighbor, my coworker, my whatever thinks like I do, acts pretty much like I do, we kind of live next door to each other, we get along fine. Doesn't matter what the race is. It's really not. It's differences that we don't do well with. So if somebody has a different view on this topic, or this one, or this one, or this one, we tend to not want to hear it. It has been my observation that the ones who are trying to cancel, whether it be events or historical figures or current situations, it's because they don't want to hear the dissenting view. They have their mind made up, and that's all they know, and that's really all they want to know.
Yeah, because it's super uncomfortable to hear a view that disrupts your current view that has seemed to work for you, right? It's like, as long as I've operated like this, things seem to operate well. And here you come with your opposing position, because that goes so true for so many people. I don't care if you're an older person, if you're a younger person. Imagine, if you will, you're a college student and all your college professors have told you that because you get a college degree, you're going to make a ton of money. You graduate from college, and that isn't the case, and you've got a mountain of debt, and you have a couple of choices. Maybe one, what your college professors told you was not correct, or two, they were correct, and somehow the system itself and those people who perpetrate the current system are working actively against you. you know like so what do we do with that? What do we do? So if it's more comfortable for me to believe that somehow the system is stopping me, versus the fact that I may need to start on my working life in a job that pays me less than I think I deserve, that's uncomfortable. So what do I want to do? I want to get rid of everybody who dare say that somehow I might need to start from the bottom and work my way up, and I may not be a millionaire 1 week out of college. So whether we talk about things that are simply political, or concepts I grew up with as a kid, it is super uncomfortable to have somebody interrupt your life, interrupt your train of thinking with something different. And so if we can cancel them, then we can continue to live our more simplified life and move forward. Continue.
Yeah, and I think going back to, like, what is cancel? What is this? And in my mind, it's kind of, when I just summarily dismiss someone, some thought, some idea, some opinion, just because it is different than it is dissenting to my view. Now, I may listen and think and reason and rationalize and still want no part of it, and still, if you will, dismiss it. I'm not going to participate or prove or whatever. But to summarily dismiss it is what I'm seeing a lot of. Like it's hard to even have a rational opposing conversation in our culture. Our current culture just doesn't allow for that. You get your narrative and you just ride it. and you get with other people who share that narrative and you don't associate with anyone else. And again, I caution anybody who's thinking, that's right, that's right. No, it's probably you too.
Yeah.
Because we tend to do that. And we don't actually, we prefer the comfort and the safety of our own little ideological, theological, whatever bubble that we're in. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that bubble that we are in per se. But to me, this idea of canceling is to just summarily dismiss it just because it's different than anything I've ever thought or believed without actually thinking, listening, reasoning, debating.
Yeah, when you caution those who might be really quick to jump in with agreement with you. Yeah, I mean, somebody like you might want to argue that Herschel Walker is the greatest college running back of all
That's
time.
true. Well, and there's no debate about that one.
Yeah. And so those Oklahoma State guys that dare argue for Barry Sanders,
he was good.
Yeah, but see, but I love how you bring that up because when people hear words like you're sharing, they're gonna find a way to implement that into how they currently think and say, yeah, those people that dismiss when they may be rather dismissive as well and unwilling to have the discussion that Barry Sanders is the greatest college running back of all time. But you know, I think
Barry was a better pro. Barry was a better pro, no doubt.
Excellent.
But I will contend Herschel would have been, but Trump messed him up.
Yeah.
We can definitely blame Trump for this one.
We just heard a USFL reference. All right. So, but back to the key part of your point. Like you take a issue, you know, very controversial issue in many people's minds, like abortion, and men are told you don't get to have a say, no matter what your say may be, because you're a male. And that hits right at your point. Like it doesn't matter what my argument might be. My argument is dismissed before it even gets started simply because I'm a guy.
Right. Yeah. And it can be anything almost arbitrarily decided upon. Like you can't say this because this or this, whatever it is. And so rather than even cancel your view, they want to just cancel you. Like, we're not even going to allow your view because we have decided that your view on this one is not valid. So we're just not even going to hear it.
Well, correct. And then we get into this word game to allow for that. Like, how do I cancel you? Not just your message, but how do I cancel you? So you may be familiar with this new term that's getting popularized, which is multiracial whiteness. And for anybody who's never heard of multiracial whiteness comes from the idea that whiteness is inherently, if you will, evil, right? It's whiteness that says, you know, math works. It's whiteness that says your work ethic matters. And so multiracial whiteness is when somebody with my skin tone dare say those same type of things. It's not that we have a dark-skinned person who argues for kids doing good in school, leading to more productive life afterwards, or your work ethic matters, or your integrity matters, or your honesty matters, but I'm actually just multiracially white. And so you get in this game of words to get at what you just said. I don't want to just eliminate the message. I want to eliminate the messenger, no matter who that might be.
Even if it's on a made up criteria.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and so what you're bringing up is a good point, and this kind of goes to what I've been saying about for years, way before last summer. But race really isn't the issue. Race really is not. It's almost never. It's always culture, not color. And so you see the canceling. So Thomas, one of our guys, Thomas Sowell, says something. He is summarily dismissed by everybody who disagrees, even those of the same color, and because he's a whatever, fill in the blank. And so even then, it doesn't, his race doesn't give him any credibility because they don't like his narrative.
Sure.
Anybody that disagrees with him he's dismissed. He's dismissed because of that, and so he's canceled. And again, these are not along racial lines; these are along narrative lines. These are along worldview lines, perspective views, and so there are, you know, the whites that would cancel me, you know, because we don't agree on whatever. And so I think it is a pretty culturally is pretty disturbing in the big picture that we somehow are at a point where the dissenting view is not listened to, the opposing perspective is not even respected, and so, you know, I don't know from a cultural standpoint, I don't know how we got here, but it appears we are firmly in a place where the dissenting, opposing view is just not respected.
Yeah. So let's switch gears or move a little bit in a different direction. From a Christian's perspective, let me give you a couple of questions to weigh in on. Should I be participating in this cancel culture? What would you encourage my thinking to be about it, and so on?
Well, and I think we've got to understand there has to be a difference between canceling the person and the activity, whatever it might be. You know, we've always said love the sinner, hate the sin, and I think the same principle applies here. And so, even if I know you are espousing some practice, some position that I have long since rationally, logically, morally, biblically, whatever, I've long since ruled that out. I can still be kind to you. I can still not be ugly to you. I must not be ugly to you. And by the way, little sidetrack here, the most professed open-minded people are the quickest to cancel you, quickest to use names that, I mean, and by the way, like, it isn't racist, like that is so Thomas Howell said it's like ketchup. You can just put it on anything, you know, just call anything racist, call anything whatever, and then you're done. I didn't like your opinion, racist, you know. And so the ones who are espouse to be open-minded, my observation has been they are the quickest to censure and censor and, you know, discredit and cancel. Well, if you claim a higher ground like Christians do, you cannot be that way. You just cannot be that way. The activity, yes, but not the person. And so we have to always remember to speak the truth in love. And that allows, and that requires respecting the other person enough to at least listen, to at least give them the respect of not canceling them, even though we already know how we feel about whatever it is they are espousing.
Well, yeah, you can. I can hear you out. I can offer my rebuttals. We can ultimately not come into agreement, but I can do all of that without being hateful to you or hate the fact that you just exist. and that alone would be a much better starting place. First of all, looking at Christians, for Christians to start from, like, I'm not, my hopes that I'm going to agree with an atheist, let's say, are not very high. But in all of that, no matter what they say, no matter what I may have to say in response, I never have to allow myself to go to a place of hating them, nor should I ever allow myself to go to a place where I hope that they don't exist. You know, one quick thought that I've had, and it's much broader than this, but it's certainly true for Christianity. is how disagreements, differing of positions, sharpen us. So one of the moments that I'll never ever forget, and I'll leave names out, but a local defense attorney who worked for our works for the county. Anyway, I asked him once. I was like, man, how do you deal, with the conscious part of defending somebody you know is guilty? And he gave a long answer, but then he said something that I'll never forget, which is, we sharpen the prosecution. We sharpen the prosecution. And his point was simply that if there wasn't somebody to argue, even for the innocence of somebody that all the facts say this person's guilty, if there wasn't somebody on that side of it, over time the prosecution would become less and less sharp. They could, you could just walk into a room, point at this guy, he's guilty, just look at him and walk out. One other thought, both of us are sports guys, but a lot of leagues have rules against how you treat the umpires. Little league baseball or football or whatever, and there's a lot of good in that. But you and I may agree, we may not agree on this, but I actually think umpires, basketball referees, etc., you're more likely to call the game better if you know there might be some immediate accountability in the stands if you blow a call. And in time, when there isn't that accountability, you get less and less sharp. So to wrap up my piece and then hand it back to you, when as a Christian, I don't mind at all being challenged about questions like, why do you believe in God? Why are you a follower of Jesus Christ? Why do you think you're going to heaven? Versus all these other things, because those questions, if I'm an honest person, those questions beg me to first answer in my own mind. And my answer had better be something more than, well, that's what my grandma told me when I was 8 years old.
Yeah, and in addition to agreeing to all of that, I would say that you mentioned about talking about with an atheist. I actually had that happen one time. I was on a flight to LA. Actually, my seatmate was a documentary filmmaker, and we were talking, and she said, "What are you doing, and why?" When it got that led to that, and she was like, "Oh," and then she goes, "I bet you're opposed to abortion too." I went, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh," and then she said, "I don't know why I'm even sitting next to you.
Yeah, yeah.
I believe in God. I'm opposed to abort. Therefore, also I'm opposed to abortion." She said those words. I don't know why I'm even sitting next to you. Well, you know what? I would rather her be the ugly one, the mean one, than me. And it should always be that way.
Amen.
The rest of the story is she simmered down a little bit. We had a rational conversation. I don't think it necessarily produced anything, but she was not going to get off that plane and say, "I met this Christian. He was the meanest, ugliest," because I didn't agree with him. He was so that wasn't going to happen, and it didn't happen. She was, but I wasn't. Again, there's that I'm open-minded thing. But I think we also uh, I like what you said about sharpening because we need to do the same thing. If we're going to say, no, you need to welcome the dissenting view, we need to be doing the same thing. I tried to practice that on social media. I follow accounts that lean way away from my perspective. I follow news accounts and news outlets, people that are not going to generally say what I would say, but it gives me a perspective. And there's been times where it's maybe even tempered my view a little bit to think, oh, I haven't actually thought about that. I'm still on I still believe this about this and this and this, but that's an insight I hadn't actually thought of. It's very easy for us to if we only hear our view, it's very easy to get fixed in it and we don't actually see the perspective. I saw on Facebook this week a guy said, "I've noticed that those who decry cancel culture are quick to cancel your culture." I thought not only is that true, but then I read the comments coming and I thought, and the people who are commenting will quickly cancel they're decrying you canceling their culture, but they will quickly cancel yours as well. And it's human nature to get our own narrative, our own perspective, and then just, and everything else is out. So that's why it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting, but it's also necessary to welcome the dissenting view, whether it be what you follow or who you read. I remember one time here and listened to a podcast by Rick Warren, and he had a teacher in school who told them that you need to have your favorite heretic. You need to have this false teacher, you're not going to agree with him, but you need to read his books. You need to have a favorite heretic. And I think culturally, socially, biblically, otherwise, we should not be afraid of that, having our favorite heretic. My old buddy VP Black used to always say, truth is not afraid of investigation.
Amen.
So if we really believe we are thinking and believing the truth, then we are not afraid of investigation. We're not afraid of questions. We're not afraid of the dissenting view. In fact, we welcome it. So if we're going to expect that of others, then we need to be doing the same thing ourselves. And that goes from everything to a moral situation, a cultural situation, a biblical doctrine, a biblical practice. Then if we're going to expect that of others, we must do the same ourselves.
Yeah, it's difficult for people to put this kind of effort in, but a good line of thought is, I shouldn't just out and out dismiss a view until I can explain it as well as the advocates of that view explain it.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that requires effort. You have to care, which is part of it. You use the word ignorance. A lot of people practice cancel culture out of ignorance, and amen to that. And other people practice it just out of sheer laziness.
Yeah.
Because it would require way too much time and effort for me to dare try to understand where you're coming from. And when you mention the news outlets, you can almost guarantee where somebody's going to be just from their news sources. And if you have a particular set of news sources that you listen to or watch or follow, if you were to flip with the person who typically argues against you, you might find that you can get why they come to that conclusion. If all of these news sources are saying this same thing, whatever it may be, you might jump on that train too if that's all you were getting fed.
Yeah.
I'll say one other thing that's interesting back to your situation on the plane. What you demonstrated there fits in perfectly with what Peter writes in his first epistle, which is, for anybody who doesn't already know this, study First Peter. For Christians who want to understand, how do I live in a culture that disagrees with me, my very being, read First Peter. And, he says in chapter 3 that we all need to be prepared to make a defense for the hope that's within us. But he also says earlier than that in chapter 2 that we need to be very mindful of our conduct, and it needs to be so honorable, in fact, that the folks that would otherwise try to run our name down can't, because of our good works. And so, like you said, you get off the plane with her, she can say lots of things, but she can't say he was a jerk, he was this, he disrespected me, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're pretty passionate. Everybody is pretty passionate about what they believe, about things that really matter. And that's when the emotions can come in, and that we just can't let that happen. So, I don't know how we got here culturally, but it is where we are. And I think it's been good that we have discussed this today.
Yeah, and I just think, just in some closing thoughts, I think all of us as Christians need to look at this as an opportunity to really do some soul searching and some real searching as to why we believe what we believe.
Yeah.
And stand firm on that. But part of standing firm isn't, I'm going to close my door and I'm not going to listen to you because you disagree with me. It's literally to open the door and say, come in and question. Come in and question. And if you are able to change my views, awesome. But in that questioning can then go both ways, and maybe we can have the influence in this world, and our light can really shine just like the light shining through your window upon the side of your face.
Yeah, but it's not shining on my head, so be thankful for that. You would need sunglasses.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate your position on this and so many other topics. Any final words from you?
No, I appreciate you having me, and it's a good. You had the idea, and it's a good one, and I appreciate it, and have enjoyed the conversation. And again, I think just if I were going to say one closing thing is, if you're going to expect the other person, what you're going to expect of the other person, you should be willing to do yourself. And so, yeah, know why you believe what you believe. Treat everybody with kindness. Treat everybody with respect, and whether they disagree or not, whether they're like totally, way off the mark, but everybody has a perspective, and sometimes it's for a reason, and sometimes it's for a reason that we just can't even understand, like we can't even comprehend, and some of those are pretty sensitive reasons that, along sensitive lines, whether it be race or religion or gender or whatever. And you may find it easy to summarily dismiss what they're saying because, okay, here goes another. But there may be something very personal in their background that has formed and created their perspective. And so there's never a reason to be mean. There's never a reason to be unkind. And so, which is ultimately what happens in cancel culture. I don't want to hear you, so I'm going to censor you and censor you, and there's no reason, there's no excuse for us to be that way. We have to be better. We've claimed a higher ground, and we have to come up with that higher ground.
Yeah. Amen to that. And Barry Sanders, greatest college
Go Dogs!
running back.
Crucial Walker.
All right. Have a good day.
Have a great day.
You
Enjoyed
too.
it.